The cigarette was never far from his hand. His trousers were louder than galleries, his drive seemed to fly forever, and the stories followed him everywhere. Late nights, casino losses, sudden withdrawals, and moments no public relations team could control. To millions of fans, John Daly was golf's ultimate rebel, but that image concealed a more complicated man. He looked nothing like the champions the sport celebrated. Daly swung hard and carried himself with the defiance of someone who had not asked permission to belong. Crowds loved him because he seemed real, yet the people who competed beside him knew the spectacle was only the surface. So what did the legends who faced John Daly believe he was really like? Their answers did not produce the portrait many expected, and the contradictions were impossible to ignore. Tiger Woods reportedly joked that if he had possessed Daly's natural talent, he might have lived the same way. Coming from golf's disciplined champion, the remarks sounded less like teasing and more like admiration, and it raised an uncomfortable question about how gifted Daly truly was. Bernhard Langer saw something beyond the cigarettes and chaos. He described Daly as an attraction and said that deep down, he was a wonderful guy. That assessment suggested the public character was not false, but incomplete, and the missing pieces were beginning to matter. Fuzzy Zoeller offered the darkest view. He reportedly regarded Daly as his own worst enemy, a player blessed with enough ability to dominate, but pulled backward by his decisions. The tragedy was not that Daly lacked greatness, it was that greatness never seemed safe in his hands. Together, their memories revealed a man built from opposites, fearless and fragile, generous and self-destructive, brilliant and painfully undisciplined. The legends did not deny the wild stories. They knew those stories were not the whole truth, and the explanation began before fame had fully found him. To understand why they spoke about Daly with admiration, frustration, and concern, the story must return to 1991, when an unknown alternate drove through the night toward Crooked Stick and changed professional golf forever, almost overnight. In August 1991, John Daly was not expected to become a major champion. He was not even expected to play. He began the PGA Championship as the ninth alternate, waiting for a series of withdrawals that seemed unlikely to happen. Then the call came and everything changed before he had time to understand it. Daly drove through the night to reach Crooked Stick, arriving without the benefit of a practice round. He had barely seen the course before stepping onto the first tee against the best players in golf. There was no careful preparation, no elaborate strategy, and no time to feel comfortable. But discomfort had never frightened him. He opened with a 69, and suddenly the unknown alternate was near the top of the leaderboard. His drives traveled distances spectators were not accustomed to seeing, carrying bunkers and cutting corners other players were forced to respect. Daly was not simply playing the course differently, he was making it look like a different course entirely. Sam Snead reportedly marveled that Daly's driver effectively cut Crooked Stick in half. Yet the power was only the most visible part of his game. Daly also displayed soft hands, fearless putting, and an ability to recover when his aggressive decisions placed him in danger. And that combination made him far more threatening than anyone had anticipated. As the tournament continued, the galleries grew larger. Fans who had never connected with golf's polished country club image recognized something familiar in Daly. He came from an ordinary background, spoke without filters, and carried himself like a man who had entered through the wrong door but refused to leave. Daly would later describe those supporters as his blue-collar crowd. They followed every booming drive and celebrated every escape, not because he behaved like a traditional champion, but because he did not. By Sunday, the anonymous alternate had become the most compelling figure in the sport. 4 days after arriving unexpectedly, Daly won the PGA Championship by 3 strokes. He had transformed from an unknown professional into golf's newest attraction almost overnight. But as the celebrations began, those closest to him sensed that the same fearlessness that had conquered Crooked Stick could eventually turn against him. Golf had discovered a player with superstar ability. Soon, however, the legends around him would realize that John Daly's greatest opponent was never standing on the other side of the fairway. By the time John Daly became one of golf's most recognizable figures, the public had decided who he was. He was the cigarette-smoking rebel with the oversized swing, loud clothes, and stories that grew wilder every year. But the players beside him saw something the cameras missed, and their answers changed the picture completely. Tiger Woods offered the most revealing glimpse. Daly once recalled inviting Tiger to skip the gym and join him for a drink. According to Daly, Woods joked that if he possessed Daly's natural talent, he might have lived the same way. Years later, they were laughing about Tiger's gym and Daly's bar, but beneath the joke was an astonishing admission. Woods built his greatness through discipline, repetition, and relentless preparation. So when Tiger appeared to acknowledge Daly's gifts, it suggested that Daly's ability was not merely impressive, it was almost unfair. Yet talent alone could not explain why so many legends worried about him. Fuzzy Zoeller's view carried less humor. He reportedly called Daly his own worst enemy and warned that repeatedly withdrawing from tournaments could exhaust the patience of fans who loved him. It sounded less like criticism from a rival and more like frustration from a friend watching someone waste chances others would never receive. Jack Nicklaus reportedly sensed the same danger. After Daly's breakthrough, Nicklaus offered him an open invitation to visit or talk whenever he needed guidance. Daly never accepted it. That unanswered offer hinted at something deeper. Perhaps the man who seemed fearless on a golf course was less comfortable asking for help. Bernhard Langer saw another side. When Daly joined the senior circuit, Langer predicted that his popularity would help the tour and described him beneath everything as a wonderful person. Langer was not praising the spectacle. He was separating the man from the mythology. Together, their answers created a portrait more complicated than Daly's public image. They saw extraordinary talent, damaging impulses, loyalty, vulnerability, and goodness inside the same person. The surprise was not that John Daly could be wild, it was how many legends believed there was greatness beneath the chaos. The legends who knew John Daly had described the talent, chaos, and warning signs, but a clear glimpse of the man behind the Wild Thing image came after his first major victory, and nobody saw it happen. During the 1991 PGA Championship, a spectator was killed by lightning, leaving two daughters. Daly had just become famous and begun earning serious money, yet he contributed $30,000 toward their college funds. For a player portrayed as reckless, the response was immediate. There was no polished campaign behind the gesture and no attempt to repair his reputation. Daly saw a family in pain and acted. The man associated with excess had shown generosity that could not be explained by publicity, and that contradiction followed him everywhere. It was one reason ordinary fans trusted him. Daly never pretended to be flawless, and he rarely disguised the damage in his life. He spoke openly about addiction, insecurity, gambling, and failure, allowing people to see not a manufactured hero, but a man struggling in public. That honesty made him relatable, but it did not make his road easier. By 1995, Daly arrived at St. Andrews during one of the darkest periods of his career, low on confidence and surrounded by doubts. Then the home of golf gave him something he had lost: belief. At the Open Championship, Daly's power mattered, but it was not the whole story. His touch around the greens, putting under pressure, and resilience carried him through a tense playoff. 4 years after shocking golf at Crooked Stick, he proved his first major was no accident. The victory changed the way people saw him. Beneath the loud clothes and barroom mythology was a player capable of patience, nerve, and emotional control when pressure was greatest. The surprise was not that Daly secretly lived perfectly, it was that the caricature had hidden so much of the truth. He could be compassionate, vulnerable, and brilliant, sometimes within the same week, yet those qualities never completely protected him from the patterns that had always threatened to pull him under, and the darkest part of his story was still waiting. The darker patterns were impossible to ignore. John Daly's career became entangled with alcohol problems, enormous gambling losses, rehabilitation, unstable relationships, and tournament withdrawals. Each episode strengthened the public image of a man living without limits, but the damage beneath that image was far less entertaining. Daly admitted that his confidence had been wounded long before fame arrived. At times, he felt rejected by the tour and convinced that people expected him to fail. The louder his reputation became, the easier it was for the vulnerable person underneath to disappear. And that may have been the most dangerous loss of all. His struggles affected more than his public standing. They interrupted seasons, damaged relationships, and repeatedly pulled attention away from his golf. Yet, reducing Daly to those failures would miss the same truth the legends around him had recognized from the beginning. Tiger Woods appeared to see natural ability that almost defied explanation. Daly could produce shots other professionals needed years of disciplined training to master, sometimes while living in a way that should have made elite performance impossible. But extraordinary talent could only carry him so far. Fuzzy Zoeller saw the painful contradiction more clearly. He saw a friend capable of greatness who repeatedly undermined himself. Jack Nicklaus apparently saw someone who might need guidance and offered a door Daly never walked through. Their concern revealed how close admiration often stood to helplessness. Bernhard Langer looked beyond the spectacle and saw a fundamentally good man whose popularity could energize an entire tour. The fans saw something similar. Daly never pretended his life was cleaner, calmer, or more controlled than it really was, and that honesty created a loyalty polished champions could not manufacture. So, who was John Daly really? He was not simply a lovable rebel, and he was never merely a cautionary tale. He was a two-time major champion whose rare gifts existed beside addiction, insecurity, and self-destruction. Those contradictions did not weaken his story. They made it impossible to forget. The legends were not shocked by how wild John Daly could be. They were shocked that behind all the chaos stood one of golf's most naturally gifted and unexpectedly compassionate figures.